You know, one of the things that was such a major earmark of my husband's ministry was the healing anointing on his life. In 1971, he had that tangible healing anointing come into his hand, and he laid hands on thousands and thousands of people and ministered to them. So I just wanted to take today and share a few of those healing testimonies that I either saw or heard about through his healing ministry. The first one is the first time he ever preached his first sermon. He thought he had done such a bad job preaching, and he couldn't wait to get into the back room after the service was over. So he went back there as quickly as he could. And when he went back there, he was, if I could say this, beating himself up because he had not preached his ideal sermon. And as he was sitting there kind of lamenting that he had even preached, there was a knock on the door, and a lady came in and said, "Mr. Dufresne, can I tell you something?" And he said, "Sure." And so she came in and she showed him the feet of her little girl. The little girl was a toddler. She had been born with a club foot. And she said, "While you were preaching, my little girl's foot turned around and completely straightened out." So that was the first time that during his preaching or one of his services, a healing had taken place. But it happened time and time and time again. I think one of the most notable times was years ago. We were in a service, and there was a young man who came up in one of his healing lines. He was about 19 years old, and his body had never functioned as it should. His kidneys had never worked right. His intestines had never worked right. And he asked, when he came forward in the healing line, Ed asked, "What is the matter with you?" And he said, "My intestines and my kidneys don't work right." Ed laid hands on him, and we got a report a few months later back from this young man that right after Ed had laid hands on him, he went back to the doctor within a few days. And the doctor said to the young man, he said, "Who's operated on you?" And he goes, "Well, nobody. What are you talking about?" And he said, "I took out in your last surgery 36 inches of your intestines." And he said, "All of that is put back in." Well, that no doubt was a miracle. That was only something God could do, but that was just one of the many that happened. I remember another time that there was a man that had come forward in one of Ed's healing lines. He had a metal rod inserted right up his spine. And because of it, the man was stiff in his back. He was not able to have full mobility. And after Ed laid hands on him and ministered to him, the man could bend over and fully touch his toes, had full mobility. And he hadn't had that since the operation. So the man went back to the doctor. He was expecting that God had turned that rod back into a bone because it was behaving completely as his own spine should have worked. And so when the doctor had him under x-ray, he said, "I want you to bend over and touch your toes." And so the man was able to do that. But this is what the doctor asked the man. He said, "Who has operated on you since I operated on you?" And he said, "Well, no one." And he said, "There are hinges now in that metal rod so that metal rod, it's not a bone, but it's behaving like a bone." So that's just another testimony of the supernatural power of God. I remember the time that we were in a service, and a little gal came up. She was maybe 24, 25 years old, and she was pregnant. She had just gotten married and gotten pregnant. She was expecting her first child, and she was about 7 or 8 months pregnant. And she came up to my husband to have him to minister to her because she had been diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. The doctors were wondering if they should induce her so that she could at least deliver the baby before she died. She had a death sentence over her head. They said there's no way that she could live more than a few weeks. So they were considering inducing her to at least deliver the baby. Well, my husband laid hands on her, and he cursed that cancerous tumor that was in her brain. And she came back a few months later, the next time we were there, and she said when she went back that the brain tumor had completely dissolved. And not only that, the doctor said what the brain tumor had destroyed in its growth, that part of the brain had grown back completely normal. So we saw time and time again these wonderful healing testimonies. It all stems from that Jesus Himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. My husband believed it. We believe it. We still carry on with that healing ministry. I remember my husband telling the time when he had a vision as a young man. He was about 31 or 32 years old. He hadn't yet entered the fivefold ministry, but he was serving in his local church as an usher. And as the ushers were lined up there, they were holding the communion elements. And Ed said to the Lord at that moment, he said, I don't even really understand what communion's all about. And when he said that, he had a vision. And it seemed to him as though the roof of that church building lifted off, and he saw Jesus hanging on the cross. And then he saw words of sickness and disease flying through the air, and they would strike Jesus, and his whole body would jolt and jar as each word would strike him. He saw every sickness and disease being laid on Jesus. I want you to know every single sickness and disease, known to man, unknown yet. Maybe ones that the doctors are able to label, or ones the doctors have not yet labeled. Jesus took them. He carried them. And I want you to know we appreciate that there's a healing anointing to be received from this ministry. And so if you need healing, right where you're at, you can receive healing. You can discern that the sickness and disease that would try to attach itself to your body, it was laid upon Jesus, and it has no right on your body. I want you to receive and have faith today. Let your faith be stirred and stimulated by these testimonies that Jesus is a healer. If He'll do it for one, He'll do it for all that who will believe. And so we wanted to just take a few moments and share it with you. We're so glad today that you were able to join us for the Dufresne Faith Journal, and we invite you to join us for the next time. And also take a few moments and just real quickly push that button on your screen to allow you to subscribe, because we want to keep in touch with you. We want to share more of what God's done with you. We thank you for joining us today. We're so glad you watched. God bless you.
Now this is what the Lord instructed me to do tonight. I want to lay hands on the sick. People, you need healing, whatever the ushers say, come down here right now. The anointing's on me to pray for you. If you need healing in your body, come up here right now. I don't know. Thank you, Jesus. Glory to God.
Isaiah 53, verse 4 and 5 tell us, "Surely He had borne our griefs, our sicknesses, and our diseases. But He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon Him, and with His stripes we are healed." As a young man in my 30s, I stood in a local church, along with other ushers ready to receive communion. Standing there, I told the Lord, I don't really understand what communion's all about. And all at once, the roof of that church disappeared, and I saw a vision. And I saw Jesus hanging on the cross, and then I saw the words of sickness and disease fly through the air, each one striking Him. I saw the words of cancer, tuberculosis, arthritis, and other diseases fly through the air. I saw words of disease that I recognized, and words I didn't recognize. The words came slower at first, then they began to come faster and faster. As each struck Him, His whole body jolted and was jarred. I was seeing every sickness and disease being laid on Him, and each word struck Him, and I saw what the prophet Isaiah saw. He was marred more than any man. He didn't even resemble a man anymore. On Him was laid every sickness and disease. As Matthew 8:17 tells us, Himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Where did He take them? He took them away from you and me.